Hey everybody, welcome back to Addiction and the Three Principles with me, Greg Suki, and my co-host here, Harry Durbitsky. And today I'm pretty excited about the topic that we've chosen to cover today, which is the stories we tell ourselves. And what we mean by that is really a lot of it is really where it comes in to be what you might call a problem is our self-limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves. The things that we've decided that, this is me, this is who I am, it's not going to change, it's just, it's just how it's going to be. A lot of those, in fact, probably all of those are actually incorrect. They're just things that we've decided on at some point in time. And they seem very real, but that doesn't necessarily make them real. So that's kind of what we want to get into today. And before we get too much into it, I want to see, I know Harry has something he wants to say before we get this kicked off.
Okay. Yeah, this topic I've always loved because I had never heard the word story before I met Greg. And then so he sort of introduced me to a new concept or a way of that we use thought. And this last couple of months, I've been going through a blood clot on my leg. And the first story I told myself was, well, just have a good attitude. It looks like it will heal itself. But when it didn't heal itself, I started to see other stories starting to come in, like I'm getting old. I have this thing is never going to go away. It hurts like hell. My leg is all swelled up. I'm even losing a tennis to my son, type of stuff. It's tragedies like that. And I started to see how this mental image of who I was changing from young and vibrant and alive and this to old man and feel it. And the more I thought about it, guess what, Greg and Marnix, the more I became it. And for the first time, it's the first time I've ever had compassion for people who are addicted from the point of being that they're sitting in a story that that keeps building and building and building. And even though it's just thought and it's just an illusion, I found it extremely heavy. Like I'm a guy who doesn't like heavy, and I found it very heavy. It's the first time I honestly felt like addicted without beyond my control type of thing. This because our body is not working on just attitude. It's got a functionality. If it's not working, you're handicapped. So I can see why when people start telling them the story, they just aren't aware that they're building up more and more story that is going to have feelings associated with it. And secondly, sometimes you have no choice but to build a story. Like this is a reality that is not just thought. There is a physicality to it and so on. So that changed my attitude. I found that healing, helpful for me personally to take another look at it. So having said that, Marnix, maybe you could say a few things about this interesting topic.
I can try.
Sure. Well,
there were a lot of, you said I'm not a guy who likes heavy. That to me is also part of the story. And this is an endless topic because you can zoom out more and more and more and more. And I guess we need stories just to have like at least a little bit of congruency in our life, a little bit going from point A to point Z somewhere. But within the larger story, there are also many, many smaller stories. And today I had a few of them happening. And there were two maybe interesting. First one is about money. And whenever I post some stuff on Facebook, and I'm quite honest about my life and how I feel, and I can feel elated, and then I make an elated post, and I can feel a little bit more grumpy, and then I have more of a grumpy post. And today or yesterday I posted something about the fact that almost anything is available for free on the internet, of course, in return for everything people know about us. And I was a little bit grumpy about the subject of finding clients in a world where you can find almost anything for free. And what I noticed that in my daily practice, after having conversations with people, many of the times they like the conversation, they're into the conversation, they get inspired by the conversation, and then we get to talk about money, and then the problems are not that big as they were before the conversation. So in a way, they're helped by the conversation, but it's not a very good business model, to be honest. But so I posted that a little bit, and then you have, of course, we're in 3 principles, and there's always somebody who says, well, yeah, it's just your thinking. And there's always someone who says, yeah, you just have like limited beliefs on thinking. And I just wanted somebody to say, yeah, shitty. It's just a shitty thing, and it happens, and it will be okay, or it won't be okay. This is just what it is. Then the other thing, somewhere in the post, I used an analogy or a metaphor about a jock in high school and some cheerleaders. And I didn't realize, I forgot that we are in a very in a part of history where people watch each other all the time, and you have to beware of what you say. And I'm pretty naive, I guess. So and some woman, she was really annoyed by that. She thought it was disrespectful. And I thought, okay. The first 10 minutes I wrote, when I read her comment, I was very pissed off. I wanted to be extremely disrespectful to her on Facebook.
I'm sure that worked really good too, being really pissed off. That really got a lot of points across.
Well, I didn't write from the point of being angry. So I just let it, inflate and deflate, and then it was gone again. So it was okay. And then I wrote her a comment, and I said, well, I respect the fact that you feel that way. To me, I was thinking about John Hughes films, which I love, and in which, like 30 years ago, with a very romanticizing of American high schools. And I was brought up with those films, so that's what I saw. But she said that I disrespected women. And I had a really tough time with that, because to my, the way I look at myself, I respect everybody. But it's very hard nowadays, because whatever you say, it can be used against you. So
that you bring up a really strong point, because we're all, Vicky's a lady, but she probably could, broaden on the topic. But it is an interesting time to be a male with the stories that are out there and the sensitivities. And as an older man, I've seen that I've had to keep growing in regards to something that I've always been insensitive about, which is saying things that offend other people. and I've been, Greg has mentioned once or twice on the show that's been brought up, and so on. But what I see with that is that there is another way of evolving. It has changed. That's the reality of the situation. So the story that we could get away with in the 50s, when Scott and I we couldn't get away with in the 60s and in the 70s. And the first thing when I got married was I thought I was extremely open towards every concept in the universe, towards women. And it turned out my wife had actually a slightly different opinion about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that hasn't changed, by the way. So, it is what you're describing, a healthy experience for us, I'm not just Guy, to understand that the model of the woman has changed in what she wants to talk about. And here's the tough one, how she wants to talk about it. Not only that, it's how. And the how is what we have the trouble with, because it's a different feeling. They want respect. They want they want you to see their beauty, and they want you to listen in a way that provides a different type of feeling than I have gotten when the guys go out, type of thing. So it's even within the topic that Greg has picked today, the story that we are creating in our head is being forced to change.
And I think I'm up with that. At least I believe I'm up with that. It was not so much.
That's the problem, Mark, that we all the guys believe they're up to that.
Yeah.
And all the women are scratching their head. What are they so proud of?
Yeah, but it's so hard, because everything. If I look down, it's not good. If I look up, it's not good. If I look, and I really try. So in this situation, I totally respect your comment and your thoughts on this. So I will reflect on that. That's just what I answered to her. And you might consider being in a three principles environment that most of your frustration is not caused by me or by my words, but it is an inside job still. She didn't buy into that.
It's like the ultimate inside joke. Everybody's in on it, they just don't know it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this topic is the plain and simple fact that we cannot go through life without stories. We always have a story. Even saying, "Oh, I've gotten beyond stories," is a story.
Yeah.
And that hit me in particular a few weeks back. I was talking to a really interesting gentleman about just general spiritual stuff and his beliefs and mine and all that, and it was a great conversation. And he it wasn't very long into it, and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "So what's your story?" And without even thinking about it, I just said, "Well, I don't have a story." And it immediately hit me. It was like, that's a story. No matter
very short one, but
yeah, it's a very short one, but it's still a story. It's still something that I've created to identify myself as myself. And we can't get away with not having that. That's the human experience. That's the ego. We talk about the ego as some bad thing. The ego is just our identity. How we use it creates a good or bad experience, or comfortable or uncomfortable, or whatever adjectives you want to use to describe it. But the fact of the matter is, we can't get through life without having our story, the story of me. The only question is, what kind of story do you want to carry with you? Do you want to be that person who gets offended at every comment that anybody says? You're perfectly welcome to do that. I mean, if that's how you want to spend your life, being upset and angry with every person you ever come into contact with, go for it. That's your choice. That's the beauty of it. I choose to try to find the commonalities with people and overlook those differences. I didn't always do that, because at times I was that guy getting upset with people for what they said and how they said it and whatever, which how they said it is only my interpretation.
Yeah.
So important that not just to emphasize what Greg said, but that is so important. That's just their interpretation, and we try to identify, it seems like, a self-reflection upon the way I think, when it has no relevance. The only relevance is that's what they think, and being detached to it, being part of the experience without it creating a thought that creates a mental image. Once the image is created, we're going to 9 times out of 10 react or act upon that image. So if we can see that people are talking from their own separate realities, it's in every situation. I think the only other part of the puzzle is to see our own beauty, and then we'll have no problem seeing it in perspective. But if we see it from a story perspective, that does not fit into my story, then we're going to have a reaction to it. And that seems to be the biggest problem I ever created in my whole life. That's the worst bad habit I've ever had, is this reaction to other people's stories because it didn't fit my story. And I hate to tell you this, but I don't think I had a bigger bad habit than that. You know, I don't think so. I think I pissed more people off than anybody in the universe because I had a stronger, more correct opinion about their opinion. And that just, today's world, that is quicksand. More than that, from the three principles perspective, that takes you away from the silence. Because you've got my opinion that is associated to it. That's so strong, Greg. I really mean it. It's really important for us to realize that our life is extremely peaceful, except for our thoughts.
Well, even with our thoughts, it could be peaceful.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
In fact, no choice, actually.
We can't control what thoughts pop into our heads. Positive psychology, positive thinking does not work. And I know that catches people the wrong way when I say that, but if it worked, it would work every time.
We'd already be doing it. Yeah.
Right. The reason it works when it works is simply because you've distracted yourself from the thought that you already had long enough for a new one to pop in. Period. It's that simple. You were trying the positive thinking thing, and I've done this in the past. You try the positive thinking thing. It's like sometimes it works. It seems to anyway. You're like, oh yeah, it worked. The other 15 times it didn't work. But the one time it did, it's like, oh, well, that proves that this works. But no, all it did was distract you long enough. And that's the key, is that waiting, that pausing, that taking that moment to just allow what is to be and realize that it's transient. Everything in life is transient, constantly changing. And, how much effort did you have to put into making that thought show up? Really, none. It just popped up. It was there. So you have to do an equal amount of effort to get it to go away, to get a new one to pop in. The more effort we put into that, the less likely we are to get beyond the current thought. If you're not comfortable with the current thought you have, just relax into it. It seems counterintuitive. It seems like it goes against everything. Well, it does go against what we've been told and what we've been taught. And it's kind of unfortunate that it is that way. But, it's all innocent. We've been innocently misdirected to believe every thought that pops into our head, and believe that every one of those thoughts must be ours and we have to do something about it. But it just isn't that way. That's just another story that we're told. So which stories would you like to have is the question. Do you like being upset all the time, or would you rather just be in a good, calm place?
and learn to tell the story in a beautiful way. Like when I went into, when I talk to people about addiction, the first story I tell them is I was never addicted. I do that for a reason, because it creates an image that I want to share with the people. So I start with that, because if I brought it in later, they would have all these ideas and thoughts about me that I wouldn't want them to be included in the looking at. Why I have gratitude, for example. It's not because I was off addiction. I have gratitude because I've touched the spiritual love within myself type of thing. So we learn to, that's what being a professional is, Marnix. If you learn to study your clients and share with them what they need to hear.
Yeah, the funny thing is where you start your stories by telling you that you were never an addict, I start my stories by telling them that I was.
Yeah, exactly. And in your case, that's 100% valid. And in my case, it's 100% valid. So that's how you start your story. It's really, it's a good start. It's not
and I like my story, to be honest. I like this. Even the shitty parts.
The shitty part is the juicy part. They get into that part. They don't care that you feel good.
Well,
yeah.
Some people do. Yeah. So for some people that means that there's hope. But it is in fact the whole story. And to me, the most exciting thing probably is the writing of the rest of the story, which happens constantly.
That's right. It changes. It changes. It evolves. The story that Greg and I started with 2.5 years ago on the show has changed in 2.5 years. We have a whole different wrap, on what we're doing and so on. And so the story evolves. And of course, as your level of consciousness grows, of course the story evolves. You're seeing clearer and clearer of what actually happened spiritually. Was it bad you were addicted? Well, it doesn't look so bad right now. No offense. It looks, no, it's actually a big benefit. Was it helpful? Was it helpful to Scotty that for many years Sid loved him, but he still didn't listen to? And I'm referring Scott to me too on this one, by the way. So don't not think. But the answer is, it brought a lot more gratitude when we did listen. That the greatest thing about this is this. Or as Greg would say, right through, Sorry, took it to a personal level there.
All right. Nothing is personal.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's just another story.
Just another story. So
stories. Here's the thing. Since I just brought that up real quick, nothing is personal, except that we make it so. Except that we create the story that person is intentionally trying to harm me. Even if they're saying words that are directed toward you and saying you are this and that and the other, it's still not personal because they don't actually know us. Nobody can. There's people who will know us better than others, but nobody can actually know us completely. Like you were talking about, Marnix, that the example, the story that you gave, that somebody got upset about, they don't know your intentions with it. No. You were not being disrespectful to women because your intentions had nothing to do with being disrespectful to women. It was a story to prove a point. And the story was not what was important. The point was what was important. So you see, that's what, more than anything, we all need to understand that we are all looking at everything differently. We all have our own story going on, and we compare. We're constantly comparing everything that we see and hear to our own story. We don't know what's really going on. We only know what we think is going on. Mm-hmm. We don't know each other's intentions, and that's a beautiful thing, is that nothing is personal. And if you feel like somebody said something that you got upset about or something, it's okay to ask them, like, hey, what did you mean by that? And then you clarify something, and then suddenly your two stories come together and you have an understanding. But just to go with your initial response of that asshole shouldn't have said that, and to just go with that and attack that person with that idea is not helpful in any circumstance. Even if that person really did actually intend to be harmful with the statement that they made. The harm only came in accepting the harm. if that makes sense. It only came in adjusting your story so that now you are harmed.
Yeah.
That's your story. They've got their story, and their story includes that they hate people of a certain color or religion or whatever it is. And that's their story. And their story does not have to impact you unless you change your story to include theirs. That's kind of the beauty of the whole thing. We don't have a choice over what thoughts pop into our heads, but we do have a choice of what story we carry with us. What kind of baggage are we bringing along?
So you bring up a good point. We have this two separate realities. So in your minds, just anyone here, how do you bring, we have disharmony, which obviously, and how do we create harmony like this? How do you see that? Because that is a big aspect of story, is how do we then, with the difference in story, create harmony together when there is disharmony? Political views, racial views, addiction views, and this, type of thing. Because everywhere we walk, Greg, we're walking into, it seems, today's world where people have totally different viewpoints about, very strong viewpoints about A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I think it's important in terms of understanding, to understand how then do we, what creates the healing or the moment of what I would call spiritual love, spiritual union between people.
I know the solution to that. Get stuck with somebody else in an elevator for 10 hours.
Well,
it always works out.
Yeah, it's only 10 hours. Yeah.
So this is.
You can't. Sorry.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. So actually, I have two comments on two different presentations, or whatever you want to call it. I'm new to the 3Ps, so my terminology is maybe not right on point, but so talking about how men talk about women regardless of what their intent is. So I'm 68, and back in my 20s, I think the Gloria Steinem movement was like really huge. And so I was at work, and I ran into a person. We were in line picking up our mail, and so this guy behind me said, "Hey, sweetheart, how are you doing today?" And he was about 68. I was in my 20s. And I turned around. I was so furious. I said, "I am not your sweetheart, so just leave me alone." Okay, so that was the end of that conversation. So when I got home, I told my mother about the incident, and she said, "How could you get so mad? That is what he grew up with, and that's what he knew. He doesn't know anything different." And that was a tremendous insight for me. That kind of, I mean, it just follows on today. You know, what you've been saying about each person comes from their own experience and their interpretation of life and so on. So now when I hear anything in that realm, I might have a response that flips through my mind instantly, but I just stop and say, like, okay, how could that be? Or that's their thing, that's not me. And so, Greg, I think you explained that really great about an inside story or an outside story. So that's how I deal with that these days. But not only how men talk about women, but anything I hear that immediately pops up a big question mark in my mind, I just say, and give it a minute to kind of sit there. And it's like you said, if you give it time, that thought will go away and another will come in. And so I know that has been validated for myself. And then the other thing about my story, so I just retired about 3 weeks ago. And what I've been doing is releasing some of the old stories because I'm not my license, my certification, my accomplishments. That's not who I am today. Yes, it's part of my past, and if someone asks specifically, yeah, I can talk about it. But going into a new group and someone says, "Oh, well, tell me about yourself," I don't go into all of that. I just go into, maybe I'm probably traveling if I'm with a new group or whatever it is, and so I try to keep it current and to what I'm doing instead of relying on some past history that I've had. So I think that's a very interesting concept about stories, because I think some people come from the perspective that you've got to have a story about your accomplishments, who you are, what you've done, the people you know. And so, yes, I have all of that, but what I just want to stay current now, going into the next phase of my life, so to speak. So I appreciated all of your comments, and thank you. So that's it.
Thank you, Vicki. It's a really vital part of healing the community of just human beings around the world, is just realizing that we all carry these different stories, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to dislike somebody just because their beliefs are different than ours. If their beliefs really rub us the wrong way, we don't have to hang out with them, but it doesn't mean we have to like hate them or despise them or be against them. That's just how they are right now. And who knows how they're going to be in 5 or 10 years? Who knows how they were 5 or 10 years ago? I'm definitely not the same person I was years ago. And I went through my own phases of hating people and hating things, and having my own just really terrible views on a lot of stuff, but that's not who I am now. But somebody who met me back then might still carry the story of who they think I am.
And will carry that story. You bring up an interesting point, Vicki, that I liked, was if you're sharing with people, it kind of answers a little bit of the question of how we come together. You share more the current feeling you have rather than the past feeling of who you were. There's a freshness in that. And anything that's fresh is alive, and it brings people together. They can feel it. They may not agree with the content of it, but they can feel the sincerity and honesty and aliveness of what you're talking about. And many times when I heard people talk about self-esteem, the words that came across was confident and enthusiastic. Those are expressions of self-esteem. And I think in terms of stories, when you're talking from a newness, there is that confidence and enthusiasm that influences people in a very positive, alive way. Because it's alive. Just because, not because I don't mean alive and energy full of, but they can sense that you're coming from a feeling of purity rather than the past. And I think in stories, we want to make sure for ourselves, we don't just talk, we don't create the old patterns of who we are. Greg's
it's kind of like food. The fresher it is, the more nutrition it holds.
Very good. That's actually a good analogy. I like that. I'll have to remember that for my next book.
Yeah. So what
to make one more comment on Harry's question about What was the question? If there is disharmony, how do
Yeah, you know, the two stories are creating
yeah.
disharmony, and how do we know from a three pre or just common sense perspective that if we come together, we're going to have a better time than if
Yeah.
we're going to have battle axes out there.
So over the past 3 weeks, I've been on 2 tours, and so and I've been with people. One group was a 3P group, and the other one was just a travel excursion. And so I didn't know any of the people in either one of the groups. And so, of course, it was a broad range of thoughts and opinions on various things in life. And so for me, I listened to them. Some of them would not be my opinion, but then I didn't really care about that because that was their opinion. I didn't have to buy it. And so I listened, and I think, at least for me, the most important component of bridging these differences and bringing us together is compassion. And so whoever someone might have talked about, or a situation that they hated, or anything of that nature, I felt compassion for that person because that is where their past experience has brought them to. And so it's not something, you know, what did the 3Ps say? It's an innocent perspective. So I don't think they created this out of meanness or lack of thought or whatever, but whatever their past experience had been, I think that contributed to their current observation of life, of whatever it was. And so to me, compassion is just a very strong factor in whatever I do.
Can you define compassion from your perspective, just for us to understand?
I would say compassion is understanding, accepting without judgment. And it is pointed towards accepting whatever is in the moment without being confrontational or argumentative. It's just trying to understand a person from where they're coming from. So that's the best I can do with that.
Pretty good, pretty good.
I like it.
Yeah, that was pretty deep, actually.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It's just
Right.
that we accept that that's what they believe.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
With
kind of
that-
like going to the zoo. When you're at the zoo, you see all these hundreds of animals. And so, like for the birds, you might like one kind of a bird, but you're saying, oh my God, I hate that other one. Well, to me, it's kind of silly because they're all birds. And so, if we have a more open perspective towards it, I think, at least for me, I can find the beauty in just about anything. And I may be adverse at the start, but if I let myself just say yes to the experience and look for, you know, the other side of the coin, other than, oh my God, I hate that. That's what helps me in life in general.
And the only thing I would add to that is, because that's absolutely perfectly stated, is the beauty starts within yourself. Like it's a funny thing. What you're saying, Vicky, is I 100% agree. You have to reach a place where you see the beauty of the other side. But I can never find it when I have a negative feeling myself. Sid always said it always started with a positive feeling, basically inside yourself. And then he would say, and then what you do is nothing. But then I heard something the other day. He didn't quite say that. He says, what you do is nothing and listen. And in the listening, we then delve into, I guess, the other side of the coin, dysfunction or disharmony. And well, we know what this is. We know that is very good.
Mm-hmm.
And we know this, but whatever, it always leaves us lacking. We have something to prove. You can see why people are argumentative. They have something to prove. The point they're trying to prove is that they're apart from where this is. And this is fighting hard to keep that. And yet we intuitively understand in every situation of life, when we come together, there's a lot of chatter that's really a lot of good energy.
Mm-hmm.
After conferences with Sid, when like he would talk, after, the best part he always said was the after. Everyone, they're full of energy. Everybody's, and that was what he called God. That's what he was talking about, living it in the moment, not listening to Sid Banks. Living it in that, and it was. You could feel the energy. And people weren't shut. It was interesting. People were talking a lot, but there was no discord. That had been erased. Everybody was just in chatter, positive chatter mode.
In love.
Beautifully said. Yeah, in love. That's right, Mark. In love. It was being in love with the whole room.
But Harry, you know what was really interesting too? There's a thing called a conference high. You go to a conference, you learn something new, and then there's a shift off. The thing with Sid's conferences and the ones that we had back then was that the high, even though it wasn't quite as high as what we were experiencing, you were starting to enjoy things at a different level. It was beautiful to feel that. You go, wow, there's hope for this thing. And that was the interesting for me. It was great. So I couldn't wait to go to a conference.
Maybe I'll tell a Sydney Banks joke about men and women. This is my favorite since it was brought up.
Good. We'll take the heat off of Marnix for his thing on that.
I might as well take. So this is Sid loved this story, and I actually asked women after, I said, "Isn't it insulting?" They said, "Oh no, not at all." And so anyway, this guy was in Hawaii on the beach, and he picked up this bottle, this genie, and up popped the genie, and it said, Master, I will give you one wish for freeing me from this. He said, "Oh, fantastic." He says, "Well, I've always wanted to go to England. This is Hawaii, but I'm afraid of flying. Could you build a bridge across?" And the guy, Genie, goes, "Oh my God, no one's ever asked me such a complicated thing. There's airways and seaways and this and that." He said, Oh, it's okay, Genie. I got another question. And he says, "Tell me how women think." And the Genie thinks for a second and says, "Will that be one lane or two?" Anyway, that's stupid. But anyway, I laughed. Everybody laughed. And in the good feelings, that story was hilarious. Yeah, but it does show separate realities. The point I think of that story is you can't understand anybody else. It's the beauty of knowing someone like Marnix or Greg or Scott or Vicky or Tim is I don't know you, but I know you can uncover some beauty in me. I know you can. There's a feeling that you have about life that whenever we touch it, it takes me into fresh newness that I love so much. Frees me of my old contaminated stories, which, type of thing. And every time I get free of it, I have less need to tell insecure stories. I love that. Psychologically, my insecure stories get less and less interesting. I become, my past is a lot of boring stories, you know, and our funny stories, you know, very funny stories, type of thing. But the feeling that I have of that, 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 that your beauty is helping me to see less of my ego and more of the truth is very, very powerful and freeing. And it does make up for those boring times when I'm alone and going, oh, I wouldn't mind something happening right now. But if I'm peaceful with it, guess what? It just seems like I'm fresh and empty for the new story that is going to come. And it's just a story, or as perhaps Sid would say, an illusion. You know, the thoughts, the illusionary nature of thought. And that's beautiful. But there's no doubt what Scott is talking about, the energy going up. We as human beings love that. It is, as Marnik said, being in love. And that is pretty cool. I like being in love. I never knew I was such a romantic. Yeah, you know.
And the beauty of the whole thing is that we're always in love. We just
That-
cover it up with our stories that we're not. That's the thing. And that feeling that you get after that really great conference or whatever, it's not caused by that conference. It's not caused by that interaction with the people. It is because that's who you already are. You can't experience anything that you're not already, that you aren't already. You can't. If you're feeling love, it's because you are love. We are all love. And we just come up with reasons to not love. That's why we naturally return to that place when we're distracted from all of this other, jumbled mess going on. We just naturally calm down and return to that place.
It's like Dick and Bettinger always says, we fall out of our thinking into the now.
Yeah.
So,
very, very good image. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
And here's my reminder to be in the meow.
I like that story, by the way. The story of your cat is great.
Yeah.
He's always there.
He's always there. He's always reminding me to be in the meow.
You know, it's interesting with stories being a grandfather around my grandkids who are 1.5 and 4.5. So there are different levels of intelligence there. And the ease of going into positive thinking, even with the 4.5-year-old, he has strong ideas, but he'll still choose the positive feeling because he loves his grandfather so much and I love him so much, type of thing. And then his dad came home. His dad got angry at him for doing something, and he went into this huge downward tailspin. He took this story and stuff, and you could see that he had been crestfallen by this his dad's insensitivity of what he was demanding of his son, and so much that he was like, so he went from totally a day and a half of real peaceful stuff into 3 seconds of accentuated type of stuff with a different type of story. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but it just hit me that how simple we give up our beautiful feelings for what life brings us. And yet, as everybody notices, that's a healthy process because we're learning and giving up stuff that is irrelevant or covering up the love inside of ourselves. And once we touch the love inside of ourselves, it seems like we just naturally know what to do, whatever the situation is. And I love that.
And love really is the answer to all the problems that the world is facing. Because we've been trying war for how long? We've been trying fighting the bad stuff forever, and it hasn't worked.
It doesn't work, but the problem
But
is
if
the
people
world
felt,
gets tired of that, and then they go to peace, but they haven't learned anything. They've just gone to peace because they got tired of war, but they didn't learn that war was not so good, type of thing. So that's why the world doesn't evolve. It just gets tired of the negativity. And sometimes you see that with human beings with their story. And that's why people have relapses and so on, is because they got tired of the negativity, but they still didn't quite embrace the truth of the expression that there's something really beautiful inside you right now. They just can't accept that alive feeling inside themselves at that moment. And so they have to go into relapse, or they have to go into re-war, to use it as because they haven't learned yet that the beauty of life cannot be stayed in there all the time, but is the only place of healing and that we're going to have. And that simplicity just seems to escape people. So we would see Sid Banks once in a while getting angry, but he would drop it like a kid would drop it. And we would see ourselves get angry and hold on to it for 2 or 3 weeks. And thus for 2 or 3 weeks, we ruined our experience. So the purpose of story is that it's the only way I can see what I'm creating. I can't see it through the invisible. I can experience it through the invisible, but I can't see it. And so story really becomes whatever you want to paint. And might as well paint, well, at least an honest story. That would be a good place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, but the true answer is for more people to feel loved and accepted and a part of. Because if you truly feel like you belong, how could you want to hurt others?
I don't believe you do want that.
Right, but it's that feeling of disconnection, of not belonging, that creates the feeling of a need to fight others, and there's me against them, and that sort of thing. It's the exact same thing with addiction too. That's why people get to that point of addiction, is because they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they're loved and accepted and cared for in the way that they need to. And that's the answer to curing addiction. It's for people to feel like they belong and that they're loved. And that's why the 3 principles are such a great thing for me, is that it points directly to that connection that we all have.
So Harry, this is Vicki. I wanted to go back to what you just said. I was really struck by what you had said, but I'm not really sure I understand it. You were saying what brings people back to their addiction if they had some relief at some moment. And so what I'm wondering, would that be something like an insight that a person can have, and then it seems to disappear or go undercover or something? And so since they don't have an awareness of that insight any longer, then they would go back to their addiction. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, you're basically looking at it correctly. That's what, like, I had a huge spiritual experience with Sydney Banks on Salt Spring Island, and it took me 40 years to really break free of all my stories. So I had experienced something that blew up my reality, but I hadn't come to grips with it yet. I just, for whatever the reason, I wasn't ready. I was immature. I had a lot of bad habits. I had a high intelligence, which I can tell you is not always the best thing with truth. And for 40 years, I would fight in and out with regards to it, but I never doubted the extent of the insight. The insight was what was saving me each time I stepped back into my ego thinking or my stories of the past. I had strong stories, but I grew to love these strong stories because every time I broke them, or Sid would call it like a prick in a balloon, pops the balloon type of thing, I discovered personal power beyond compare. So each one of them was succulent, but debilitating, and psychologically debilitating. But spiritually, it was always lifting me closer and closer to the point where I would see simply and clearly who I am. And when I reached a point, which isn't like an enlightenment experience, but you know, in this process of it, I stopped a lot of that thinking, not with willpower or it just stopped. And the reason it stopped was I had seen that it was easier just to be Harry than to be anybody else than Harry, or what Greg thought of Harry, you know, type of thing. It was easier just to be Harry. And once I could be just Harry, I liked Harry. He's different, I'll give you that. He's different. He's not everyone's cup of tea maybe, but he's, you know, I liked him. And once I liked me, it was easier to be sure. Stories didn't have to prove something. Can you see it? Before, when I was insecure, the stories, I was always like on the make, like a guy trying to ask a girl on a date. And is that coming from me? I don't think so. And after that, it was just Harry. And if Greg disagreed with Harry, I respected that, but it wasn't the end of the world. And we could talk about it because I wasn't upset that he was disagreeing with me because I was just being Harry. Harry's fine just being himself. And that becomes the answer to all stories, is if you're just being yourself, can't go wrong. You're doing your best. And you take what you have, you know. The bad jokes that Greg says are lousy, and and
Those are fantastic jokes, by the way.
and so on. But you just take it and love, you know, who you are, and the more you relax with that, the stories become better, you know, because they're relaxed stories rather than uptight. I never, to be honest, up to a certain stage, I never really felt like I was being myself. I knew I was phony. I knew I was lying about myself. I was trying to create images. If there were 10 people there, I would say there's 50. Well, there were only 10. But after a while, saying there were 10 people there was good enough. I didn't have to embellish it with a whole bunch of ribbons and so on. So being ourselves helps the stories, and also, of course, as Greg would allude to, also to forgive yourself when one or two of the stories go a little off base. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. We're experimenting all the time. You know, it's the new experiences are going to bring new tests of testimony. You know, that's why Greg and I do the show is because it brings a newness into our life. We don't really know what we're going to talk about. Greg's and I preparation was, do you have anything you want to talk together before we go? He says, well, what do you? I said, not really. He says, no, not me either. Let's just, that's our prep. So it's a fresh feeling. And where's that?
I can't tell where that's from. There. So, well, this has been a great conversation today. This is what I was hoping to get out of this, was just, seeing where people are at with it, because that's where it all comes down to, is where people are and where we're heading. And it feels like, as a society, as I don't know, as the human race, or whatever you want to call it, it feels like everybody's kind of trying to get in this direction. They don't necessarily know how to, or maybe they're afraid to, because everybody they know isn't heading in this direction of, the love and acceptance and compassion toward everybody, but don't let that stop you. Don't let that stop you from experiencing your true self. Just because you're surrounded by people who are not loving and caring does not mean that you can't be. And in fact, you becoming your true self around them may give them the courage to become their true selves. So we can't be rid of our stories, but we can guide them, and we can choose what kind of story we want to carry with us. And today I choose love and compassion. And so far it's been working out pretty well.
Maybe we could ask if anyone has a question, one last question before we wrap it up, Greg, because a few new people showed up. Just in case someone has a question or observation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would like to know more about insights. If maybe in a future session, that could be a focus point, because I was really interested again, Harry, in what you were saying about going back to addiction. And I would say that when I first got into the 3 principles, I had 2 huge insights. I mean, it was just remarkable. But with each one of those, within about 3 or 4 weeks, and I don't know the correct phrase for this, but they seem to have disappeared. And so I know they were still inside of me somewhere, but I had no clue how to reconnect. And so once they disappeared, I did kind of go back to my lifestyle before I had those insights. And so again, now just a few weeks ago, I had an insight. And in between the ones I'd had before and this one, I was reading that maybe I needed to learn more about the insights or what it revolved around. And so that's what I continue to do. And so when I had this most recent one, it was so clear that I knew exactly what it was pointing towards. The other 2 were very elusive, like don't let anyone take your control of yourself, or, oh, this is just a thought. So those were highly enlightening at the moment, but when they disappeared, it was like, okay, what do I do now? And I just kind of reverted back to how I was before those. So now I'm really interested in if there is any more discussion that could be had around an insight, and so that's just my question. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that goes right along with what we've been talking about this whole time, because an insight is to see within. You're seeing something that is already you. That's you without the story. And then the story kicks in. It comes back into play. You haven't lost what was there. It was there all along, and it's not going to go anywhere. You've just lost sight of it.
Yeah.
Which is normal.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the process. You're stepping into the unknown. Once a level of consciousness is completed, you're naturally going to evolve into another level of consciousness, which is the unknown, which leaves you into it doesn't have relationship to the known part. You're actually, when you have an insight, experiencing the unknown, which is where all the goodies are. And then you have to learn to see how that works so that you're comfortable with it. And when you see that actually it's actually happening, or you have gratitude for it, then naturally you just let it happen. Until that point, you're going to be always having a little bit of friction with it, which is my story for 40 years. That's actually what happened. I would, everything was fine, but I have Mr. Noisy up here, and he had stories for me, and I was believing these stories, and so bit by bit, or chunks at a time, they would evaporate. It's just freedoms, Vicky. You're going for total freedom, and the fact that you're on the right path is verified by the fact that you're talking about insights. So you already, that's where, when you had those insights, that was freedom. Freedom from Mr. Noisy.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a good question. The other thing I would mention, Vicky, I can't remember what we talked about, but about 2 years ago, we did have a show on insights, and I would recommend you go and listen to it.
How would I find that?
Greg, can you tell her how that?
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel, which is Addiction and the Three Principles. If you look that up on YouTube, it has
Addiction,
all of our
Alcoholism, and the Three Principles.
it's Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles. So if you look that up, it has all of our recordings on there, which are about 50 or so.
Yeah, over
Plus
50 now.
Plus, like the highlights reels that Harry came up with, which is really excellent. Nice, golden moment series that he came up with on there. So there's a lot of good stuff on the channel.
Great. Thank you so much, because I just started the 3 Ps about 2 years ago. So if I happen to have listened to that, I probably didn't have the understanding that I would have now, because I've had some insights and I've been able to look at them from different perspectives. And so I will definitely look that up and go back and listen to it again. Thank you.
There's a wealth there, and the Golden Moments course that was created is excerpts into a course with 15, 20, 25-minute episodes, and that also will take you a deep way. It's a free resource, and that's what Greg and I have been very strong in, is offering high quality free resources, great guests, great participation, and so on. And people, if they want to grow, they have to listen beyond just the normal people. Don't listen to names, guys. It's a waste of time. Listen to feelings, people who you are attracted to, or topics that you're attracted to. Don't listen to, oh, this person is this and they're perfect. I hate to say it, but it's a boring topic in the 3P. You've got to listen to energy. There's a lot of newness on our website. And it's the reason Greg and I have been allowed to go on for so long, is we've been touched by the newness that the program has taken to us, and also the teaching that we have learned from our guests, from our participants, from each other. And it's been very, very beneficial for our development. If it helps us, it obviously help other people as well. So definitely use those resources. They're free and they're high quality stuff. And as Scott mentioned, they're a little different than what other people are doing. And that's important to see. See the difference as well as the beauty, the expression of it. You know, all we're trying to do is express something creatively here today, a creative moment, with the topic being stories.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question before we wrap it up? It was a fun topic, Greg. It was a good topic for sure.
Yeah, this was really good discussion.
And our format, generally speaking, is a guest the first and then a group discussion the second in the month. And we're always looking for topics that we feel that we don't need 50 people. If we have a core group like this, it leads to a really good living room discussion. And so please mention if you do have a topic like like Vicky mentioned, we could easily address. We will address before New Year's, Vicky, the topic of insight as one of, not New Year's, the finish of the season. I'm mixed up. We'll talk about insight. We have one openings coming up, and our next guest in April 14th is an unusual one for us. Michael Neal is coming on, so I hope you'll come and join us for that. It'll be a different flavor for sure than many of our talks. And that's another thing we're trying to do is, whether we agree or disagree or like or dislike, we're trying to present as many different, everybody's viewpoint is bringing enrichment to our consciousness. And especially, 3P community, I don't think you realize how special it is in terms of addiction. Out there in the addiction world, it can be a bit of a horror show. It is so refreshing to have a room like this where people are, I hate to say it, but smiling most of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And participating.
Yeah, and participating.
Which is the beauty of it, because that participation is, in my experience, the best way to grow. You can sit and listen all you want, but when you start speaking it and you start asking the questions and making the comments and whatnot, things just come up. And you start having these little insights. And we tend to overlook the popcorn insights, the little ones that pop up here and there. Those are actually the most important for most people. Most of us don't have the huge experience like Sid Banks. We have the smaller ones that all add up. And we overlook it because each of them is so small. And yet they all gradually shift our attention toward ultimately where we want it to be. So every tiny little insight makes just as big of a difference as a huge one.
They're all beautiful.
Yeah. And it's all you already. It's nothing new. It's just something you're now noticing. So thanks everybody for participating today and showing up and hanging out. It is like having that living room conversation, but we didn't have to clean up before or after. So everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank
Couple
you.
of weeks.
You